Welcome to Inspiro's Diabetes Debunked audio blog. My name is James Harper, and I'm a health and wellness coach that specializes in helping people with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes lower and manage their A1C levels to a healthy and normal range. The goal of this blog is very simple: to give you the relevant information so that you can make better decisions to help resolve your pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes issue. So sit back and tune in. So welcome everyone. Right now I have Faith Ogbonna with me. She was a client of mine and she has a testimonial that she wants to say. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you, Faith. Thank you for being here at this moment in time.
Thank you, James. It's an honor, a real pleasure to be able to do this. The thanks go out to you. After God, it's all you, I would say. Yeah. Great coach.
I have to say,
Great coach.
Well, thank you so much, but I have to say it's all you too, because at the end of the day, you were receptive to do the work. So just to let you give a little background, Faith was, she was a client of mine. I believe we met last year. Last year we met? Yes, last year. Last year we met. And so I'm here for her to tell her story, what happened, what was her predicament before. And, in between I'll ask a few questions. So the floor is all yours, Faith. So first of all, you can give your story, what happened before, and we'll talk from there.
Well, thanks again, James. So I'll try to make it as concise as possible. So essentially, last year, June, I had this major episode, right? So prior to that, I was diagnosed pre-diabetic and everything seemed to be going fine. I didn't really have any issues. Of course, I was not testing regularly or any of that stuff because pre, in my mind meant, well, yeah, it's not happening yet, right?
Right.
So I was taking good care of myself, eating relatively well, doing what I thought would keep things under control. And but last year, June, I had this major episode that seemed to come from absolutely nowhere. And I woke up in the hospital.
Oh,
I had been there for 4 days, and I was not even aware that 4 days had passed, right? I had no idea of that. I thought I'd just been in there like the night before.
Right.
And so
and before we go on, so the episode was like a hyperglycemic episode.
It was right. My A1C on admission to the hospital was 15.4.
15.4. 15.4. Right. So that was very serious. So for people who do not know, A1C is supposed to be below 5.7 to be considered as a healthy A1C. Somebody who is pre-diabetic is actually between 5.7 to 6.2. So 15 is actually very high. It's high to a point that, as Faith said, it's what you call a hypoglycemic emergency. So what you underwent was an hyperglycemic. Sorry about that. Hyper means high blood sugar, hyperglycemic emergency. So sorry about that, Faith. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes. And as the doctors said, a life-threatening emergency at that. So there I was. Thankfully, I came through that episode. It was pretty frightening when the details of that is broken out, right? Because my understanding from the doctors is when it got to that level in my instance, we're looking at issues with organs and, things are happening that could be fatal at that point. So they were really concerned about stabilizing me and getting me, back to a point where, first of all, I would wake up, and two, that I would be in a position where they would be able to discharge me and not have to, ward me for any extensive amount of time.
Okay.
Fortunately enough for me, by the grace of God, that did happen.
Right. And that's great.
That did happen. But before I was discharged, here in the US, the healthcare system is a little different. So before I was discharged, they brought in a diabetes counselor. I met with, several folks
Healthcare,
from different disciplines, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that
healthcare
would,
practitioners.
yes, that would prepare me for this life, this new life that I'm gonna live, right?
Hmm.
So I should say though that, when I heard that, now I was like really considered diabetic. Of course, I had to be on insulin while I was in there. I basically had insulin with every meal, right? They had to test my blood sugar before the meal to determine how much insulin I would need, you know, and that happened with every single meal that I had once I became,
Yeah,
conscious again, once I was
once you
awake,
became.
right? Yeah.
So in a nutshell, you were in a coma for 3 days. That's what they were telling you,
Yes.
right? So it was really serious then, right? And that's because your blood sugar was really high. Okay. So
Yes.
so you reach out. So what was, now I know you said that it was very scary for you, but what emotions did you feel when you got diagnosed? Did you feel a sense of hopelessness? Did you feel, just explain to the audience out there, the feelings that someone like you in that experience. What are some of the emotions that you go through?
Well, at first, I was almost in a sort of a daze, even though I was fully awake now, right? And the daze being, how could 3 or 4 days go by and I not even know what happened? I didn't recall anything that led up to me being in there. And so that was the first thing. It was like, is this real? Is this what's happening? Is it real? Am I dreaming that this is happening to me? And then the other part of that was I became fearful, scared, right? It's like, well, my life is never going to be the same again. I won't be able to enjoy my life, the things that I like to eat, the things that I like to do. I won't be able to go out with my friends because, but I can't have that. I can't have this. I can't do that, And so it was overwhelming and very confusing.
Right. So you felt very
And
confused.
yes, and even when I met with the counselor, right, the nutrition counselor, um, to me, it became even more overwhelming because, for us, we eat, right? We don't think about, complex carbs and
Yeah.
simple carbs and all of those things in our general life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We eat, we eat, we want some rice or potatoes or some, right? And so in having that discussion, this idea that, there are carbs in so many things that you're not even thinking carbs, right?
Yeah.
And so that I felt like, well, my goodness, how I will never be able to do this on my own. How I'm gonna have to like just stick to this little diet that I have here right now. And that's all I'm gonna be able to eat for the rest of my life if I want to be good and healthy. So it was confusing, it was overwhelming, it was a little terrifying too, because
Okay.
it was all new. And, it was all happening fast. And I felt
Fast.
like, I would have to do this alone by myself. Yeah. And I wasn't quite sure, that I would be successful at doing that. Right. So that was the other part of the fear that, I guess I would never be healthy again because, I don't know if I could do this.
Okay. Okay. And you felt overwhelmed with the amount of information that given, because sometimes it could be like an information overload for you at that point in time because you're trying to process a lot of things, and and that's what you were going through is something called diabetes distress. And a lot of people and a lot of healthcare practitioners, we don't empathize with the actual patient because we don't understand what they're going through. We don't treat them as a person. Sometimes we treat them as a patient and not as a person. We don't. And before, I've been very guilty of that. And it's only until like after some time, with years of the little experience, I've learned that, hey, this is a person who's going through real problems. This is a person who has their challenges. So those were the challenges that you were going through. And so explain to me, what gave you that initial push for you to like say, okay, this is my situation here, but I don't think deep down in my heart that this is it for me. What gave you that initial push?
Well, as you were just saying that sometimes you're guilty of, you know, treating individuals just generally as patients.
Yeah.
And as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself that, that was not what I got from our interaction at all. I dare say, James, that, I mean, really and truly for me, you were the difference. When my niece called and she said, look, I want to give you something. I want you to have a consultation with James. And I said, well, I've already had that. I sat through that. She was there with me for almost an hour, talking with me while I was in the hospital. And she says, no, but this is different. You should give it a try. And so, when I came to the consultation, I didn't expect to hear anything new, anything different, and I did not expect the approach that you took. And so to go back to your question, what made the difference was your approach to dealing with this and what you shared with me that empowered me to be able to move forward. In that consultation, James, you presented a very, very practical, culturally sensitive approach, right?
Culturally sensitive, yes.
Yes, yes, that's important, right? Because I'm a Caribbean woman. I like flavor in my food. I like, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And so, yes, yeah, practical, culturally, sensitive and appropriate for me, and a very real way of handling this, first of all, right?
Right.
You broke it down, you explained, right? Because before meeting you, the approach was that this is basically, if you want to call it a disease, that is going to stay with you for the rest of your life, which in fact, it can and will, right? Because you always have to be very
mindful,
correct of what's happening. But at the same time, if I hear that, it puts me in the mindset that this is where I'll stay, even though I can do things, that this is the path that we're gonna go, right?
Yeah.
And so meeting with you changed that for me, right? Number one, you told me that this can change in a positive way. That was the first thing, right? The second thing was, you asked me a lot of questions, not just about the illness, about, work, life, family. And in asking me those questions, you sort of guided me to setting up a real solid support system, right? That is something that I didn't even think about before, right? And then you brought in like the real life aspect to that, right? The reality that, look, even as you take care of yourself and you work towards, being diabetes free, that, you still have to be happy and you still have to enjoy life, you know,
Yes, yes.
as best as you can, right? So you talked about birthdays and anniversaries and all of that, and how because prior to that, I'm thinking, well, yeah, I'm gonna have to miss all of these because, what am I gonna go there and eat salad? You know,
Yes, yes.
so
Vegetables, vegetables
so
and salads alone.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and
Rabbit food,
can't, can't,
rabbit food, as we like to call it.
right,
Yeah.
can't have a drink, any of that good stuff, right? And so you brought that practical piece in, right? Because you talked about living with this diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
And really living, embracing all of life with it. And so for me, that changed everything. When I got off that consultation, I felt prepared to take this on. It's like really like a coach, right? I use that analogy a lot, right? It's like, you're going to be a champion athlete, right?
You need a coach.
And right, and the coach says, okay, this is how we'll do it. Of course, you've got to get out there and sweat and practice and do all that stuff under guidance, but still, it is the coaching that helps you get there. And that's what made the difference for me. That's really what made the difference.
And in the same breath, Faith, I have to commend you because you were very receptive to the coaching. You were very receptive, and you were open. And a good thing what you had, and I will always say, even if whoever you go by, you should always have a good attitude towards the process. I'm not saying you're going to enjoy the process every day, but having a good attitude is one. And Faith, you open, you're receptive, you're honest, and that's another thing too. I know you say a lot, and I'm very grateful for that, but you have to give yourself 100 out of 100, 5 stars, because at the end of the day, you followed through. Because I can give you all the guidance in the world, but at the end of the day, you as the person, you as the individual, you have to follow through, and you followed through. And to me, I'm so happy. When I saw the progress that you made, that made me so happy, because at the end of the day, I was like, wow, look how Faith made that transformation. So that's what I would like to ask you, the changes or the transformation that you have made. So like the improvements in your life. So like things like maybe if your weight changed, if you came off of medication, your A1C levels now, and your new lease on life, how you feel about tackling type 2 diabetes and being diabetes free. Type 2 diabetes free, that is.
So I feel like this is the best time of my life. Sometimes I've heard someone say sometimes that bad things have to happen for good things to happen sometimes. And I feel like that's what happened with this, because so many things happened. Everything changed, right? So when I started off this conversation, I was sharing, where I was with that, 15.4 and all of that stuff. And so, and I talked about, being in the hospital with the insulin and all that good stuff. So here we are. Well, after I met with you, I'm going to go to my 3-month visit with the endocrinologist, right? And so when I met with her, when I met with her after coming out of the hospital, that is, I was still on insulin, right? I was, at that time, I was right up maybe around 200 pounds. Still, I'd lost some weight while I was in the hospital, but I was still around 200, right? So I may have lost like maybe about 20 pounds while I was in the hospital.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And,
Okay.
and so yeah, when I met with her for my 3-month visit, all right, between the time that I came out from the hospital, after I met you, James, my blood sugar readings, even though I was insulin, initially were like around 170, even with insulin, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so after I met you, and you talked with me about diet, intermittent fasting, exercise. We talked about that. We talked about the use of things like olive oil and
Yeah.
all of the healthy, helpful tips, right? Water consumption, all of that good stuff. And so I really tried my best to stay rigidly to what you told me, right? The broths in the afternoon and all of that good stuff.
Right.
So I went back to see her 3 months. And within that time, of course, we did the A1C test, right? So my A1C had dropped all the way down, James, to 6.2, right? I lost an additional 30 pounds, right?
Okay.
And she was just so excited. Okay, she was just so excited. She just couldn't understand how this would happen. And she was asking, so what are you doing? Please tell me, what are you doing? And I shared with her, some of what I was doing in terms of diet. Of course, I mentioned that I had met with you. And she says, well, you know what? I think we can beat this thing, She says, she says, I really haven't seen this kind of progress in any of my patients, right?
Yeah.
So she says, she says, whatever is happening in here, let you just keep doing it. She says, I'm gonna cut the medication.
Okay, that's good.
Right. So I came off of insulin very, very gradually, right? So she started off by dropping 5 points at a time, right? So for each day that the levels came in under a certain level, that day I would drop it 5 points. And as it kept going down, we could do that. And I absolutely came off of that within less than a month, right?
Less than a month.
Less than a month. I came off completely off of that. And then we started the metformin, right? And so I have to call her back because the sugar levels were really dipping low now, right? I was waking up. Yeah, I was waking up at like 67.
High post.
Yeah, low.
Yeah, really,
right.
Really low. Yes, really
low. So she was like, no, we've got to take you off of this too, right?
So you're free of medication?
None whatsoever. I haven't been on any medication since January of this year. I haven't been on any medication whatsoever. None. All right. And so the last A1C was at 6.0, right? And we're working aggressively towards that. So I'm now at, yesterday I was at 167.
167, right? Okay. So you lost like close to 33 pounds from the initial
Yes,
thing at 200.
yes, yes. So I was at 167. I am feeling great. Look, I started exercising, like, that's my new thing. At first, it was terrible, terrible. I couldn't even do 5 sit-ups. I couldn't, you know. And I had to get help, you know.
Yeah.
My son, he was really a good trooper for me, really solid support.
Yes.
So he would get up in the morning with me once I got up. So I want to go back to that because you'd asked me a question and I really do want to answer that. You know, I think part of why I'm so successful, as you put it, is that I really had the mindset that I really didn't want to have to do this. I didn't want to have to take a shot before I ate, you know. I didn't want to, when I first started off, I was testing 7 times a day.
Yeah.
I would test before each meal, right? And I would test before I go to bed at night.
Okay.
Okay. And I would record everything I ate.
Religiously.
Right? Everything. Yes, because I was trying to understand, you know, what would make it go up a little bit, what would, you know.
Yeah.
And I did that. So I really had the mindset that I did not want to, you know, live like that. And that I would try to do everything that I could to make this work, if in fact what you're saying is true, that it could work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really put everything that I have into it. I will admit that, you know.
And that's good. And that's good. And that's what you need to do. So one last question. So I'm happy that so you're what we call a success story. You came off of medication, you came off of insulin, you lost weight, you have a new lease on life and everything. Just one last question. Was the program, now the signature program that I have is something called the A1C breakdown. Was it a complicated, now it had a lot of intricate detail in it, but was it like a complicated process for you? Like, okay, it was difficult to follow, it was difficult to handle. I mean, of course, there are adjustments because you're making lifestyle changes. But was it like you have to count carbs and do this, and was it crash dieting or counting calories? Was it difficult like that?
No, none of that. So the way you explained it, the way you talked about, I mean, you went into such detail, right? You discussed all of the different food areas, you know, how things work, you know, fats, protein, all of that good stuff, you know. So the way you broke it out, you really went into the detail, took time to explain, give a good understanding
Right.
of how these food groups work, and you know how you can use them or combine them in a way that helps to you know, boost your metabolism, to help, you know,
Control your
break
blood
down the
sugar.
food properly and control the exactly, right? So you gave the tools, you went into great detail, but you also, you know, did it in a way that is easy to understand, right? It's not all medical jargon and generalizations. No, it's also pretty specific to the individual, to me. You know, you took the time asking all those questions so that you could put it in that kind of a context and make it relatable for me, right? So that you made it really, really simple. I honestly, I never felt deprived. Even some of the things that I thought I couldn't have, I remember I was telling you, well, you know, James, I like to have fruit in the morning, and you know, and then you went into some detail and you were like, you know, you can still have some of that, and you talked about, combining fruits or avoiding that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Having one type of carb when you're having carbs and so on, not, how we like provision and stuff,
Right, exactly.
right,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So again, you made it, you explained it, but you also made it relatable and simple in how to apply it and how to use it. So I would say, no, it's not complex in that regard, because you simplify it and you make it workable. And in addition to that, you're always available. If I had a question, if I wasn't clear on something, right? So even if at first, I didn't understand something, or, I thought of a question after, or I'm about to prepare something and I'm not really sure, I can send you off a little message, or, and you would respond, right? So, the information you give, the way you give it, the way you follow up, you in yourself are not just a coach, but in a way, support, right? And that's how it worked for me. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, I would recommend, this might sound a little cliche, you hear this stuff all the time, I would recommend, but this is what I would say to anyone, particular somebody who is newly diagnosed, because like I said, that is like a punch in the gut, right? When we think of diabetes, we begin to conjure up all these, at least I did, conjure up all these things about what you can't do, what you can't have. And I would say initially, and to some extent, that is true, because you're trying to gain control, right? And what I also learned, because I have friends who are diabetic, what I also learned is that, it's good to have this dialogue with James, because it sort of helps you also to understand how you eat, how, for example, like, some of us like to eat late in the evening, have your heaviest meal late, that kind of thing. So as you have this dialogue with you, James, I begun to kind of learn some things about my own habits, right? That I could change or make slight modifications to. Even slight modifications made a difference for me, right?
Yeah.
And so, James, I certainly would encourage anyone, who has diabetes or, was just diagnosed, to, take a look at this, talk to James, or better yet, have James talk, not to you, but with you, because that's basically how he does it. He's not, it's not a lecturing kind of thing, and James, you also have that really